My name is Clara Sinclair, and I never expected to hear my husband's name whispered with such venom at a party I was attending. But there I was, standing on the patio of Gregory's lavish mansion, when Vivian's voice sliced through the evening air like a poisoned blade. Elliot will always come back to me. Clara's just a placeholder. I froze, my champagne flute halfway to my lips. The cool night breeze suddenly felt icy against my skin as I strained to hear more. "Oh, come on, Vivian," a man's voice replied, thick with skepticism. "They've been married for 3 years now. I think it's time to let it go." Vivian's laugh was sharp and brittle. "You clearly don't know Elliot like I do. He's just playing house with Little Miss Accountant. When he's ready for the real thing, he'll be back." I'd had enough. Squaring my shoulders, I stepped around the corner, coming face to face with Vivian and her companion. "Is that so?" I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling in my chest. Vivian's perfect features arranged themselves into a mask of surprise. "Clara, I didn't see you there. We were just catching up on old times." "I'm sure you were," I replied coolly. "Tell me, Vivian, do you often discuss your ex-boyfriend's marriages at parties? Or am I just special?" The man beside her, I recognized him as one of Gregory's business associates, looked uncomfortable. "I think I hear someone calling me," he muttered, beating a hasty retreat. Vivian's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened. "Oh, Clara, you're so sensitive. I was just reminiscing about the good old days. Surely you're not threatened by a few harmless memories." Before I could respond, I felt a warm hand on my lower back. "There you are, sweetheart," Elliot said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "I've been looking everywhere for you." His eyes flickered to Vivian, and I saw a flash of something surprise, discomfort, cross his face. "Vivian," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Elliot," Vivian's voice dripped with honey. "What a lovely surprise. I was just telling Clara here about some of our adventures back in college. Remember that weekend in Cabo?" I felt Elliot stiffen beside me. "That was a long time ago, Viv," he said firmly. "Ancient history." "Of course," Vivian purred. "But you know what they say, history has a way of repeating itself." I'd had enough. "Well, it's been delightful catching up," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I'm afraid we have other guests to greet. Enjoy the party, Vivian." As we walked away, I could feel Vivian's eyes boring into my back. Elliot squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he murmured. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" But as we made our way through the crowded party, exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances and business associates, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my stomach. Vivian's words echoed in my mind, along with the memory of Elliot's reaction. It was subtle, but I knew my husband. There had been a moment, just a flicker, of something more than simple discomfort at seeing an ex. As the night wore on, I found myself watching Elliot more closely. The way he laughed a little too loudly at Gregory's jokes. The extra glass of scotch he knocked back when he thought I wasn't looking. And then, just as we were preparing to leave, I saw it, a quick, furtive glance across the room to where Vivian stood, holding court with a group of admirers. It was nothing, I told myself. A coincidence. Paranoia brought on by too much champagne and Vivian's poisonous words. But as we drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. That this party, this chance encounter, was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. Little did I know just how right I was. The weeks following Gregory's party were a blur of social engagements and business dinners. Everywhere we turned, Vivian seemed to materialize, her presence a constant reminder of that night on the patio. I tried to shake off my unease, but it clung to me like a second skin. "Clara, darling." Vivian's voice rang out across the crowded restaurant. Elliot and I were having dinner with some of his business associates when she sauntered over, all smiles and sparkling eyes. What a delightful coincidence. I doubted it was a coincidence at all. "Vivian," I replied, forcing a smile. "How unexpected." Elliot shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Viv, we're in the middle of a business dinner." Oh, don't let me interrupt, she purred, laying a hand on Elliot's shoulder. I just wanted to say hello to my favorite power couple. As she chatted with the group, I watched Elliot's face. He was smiling, but there was tension around his eyes. When Vivian finally sashayed away, I couldn't help but notice how his gaze lingered on her retreating form. She certainly knows how to make an entrance. One of Elliot's associates chuckled. That's our Vivian, Elliot replied, his tone light, but his eyes avoiding mine. The next day, I met Margot for coffee, desperate for a sympathetic ear. I don't know, Margot. I sighed, stirring my latte absently. Am I overreacting? Elliot says I'm being paranoid, but… Margot's eyes narrowed. But what? Has something else happened? I hesitated, then plunged ahead. Vivian's everywhere lately. At parties, restaurants, even the gym. And Elliot. He's different when she's around. Distracted. Tense. Have you talked to him about it? I've tried, I admitted. But he just brushes it off, says it's all in my head. Margot reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Trust your instincts, Clara. You're too smart to ignore them. Her words echoed in my mind that evening as I sorted through the laundry. As I shook out Elliot's suit jacket, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. Curious, I picked it up. My heart stopped as I read the hastily scrawled words. Meet me at the usual place. 8 p.m.
V.
The room spun. I sank onto the bed, the note clutched in my trembling hand. This couldn't be happening. There had to be an explanation. I heard the front door open. Elliot's familiar footsteps in the hallway. Clara, he called out. You home? I quickly stuffed the note in my pocket, my mind racing. In here, I managed to reply, my voice surprisingly steady. Elliot appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. Everything okay? You look pale. I stood up, forcing a smile. Just tired. Long day at work. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my explanation. As he moved to hang up his jacket, I watched him closely, searching for any sign of guilt or deception. But his face was an unreadable mask. I have to work late tomorrow, he said casually, not meeting my eyes. Big project due. My stomach clenched. Tomorrow was Thursday. The note had said 8 p.m. Oh. I kept my voice light. Anything I can help with? He shook his head quickly.
No.
Just boring paperwork. You'd hate it. I nodded, my mind whirling. What was I going to do? Confront him? Follow him? The thought of my husband sneaking around with Vivian made me feel physically ill. As we got ready for bed that night, the silence between us felt oppressive. Elliot kissed me goodnight, but it felt perfunctory, distant. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the note burning a hole in my pocket and my heart. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Because one thing was certain, this unseen rivalry with Vivian was no longer just in my head. It was very, very real. The next evening, I paced our living room, my nerves frayed to breaking point. Elliot had left for his late night at the office an hour ago, his kiss on my cheek feeling like a brand of betrayal. The note burned in my pocket, a constant reminder of the confrontation to come. At 7:45, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove to the address I'd found in Elliot's contact list for Vivian's new gallery. My hands shook as I parked across the street, watching the entrance intently. At 7:58, a familiar car pulled up. My heart sank as I watched Elliot step out, straightening his tie before entering the building. I waited 5 excruciating minutes before following. The gallery was dimly lit, soft music playing in the background. I heard voices coming from a back room and crept closer, my heart pounding. Elliot, darling, I'm so glad you could make it. Vivian's sultry voice drifted out. Vivian, we need to talk about this. It can't go on, Elliot replied, his tone strained. I couldn't take it anymore. I burst into the room, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. What exactly can't go on, Elliot? They both whirled to face me, shock evident on their faces. Elliot paled. Clara, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I spat. Funny place for a business meeting, don't you think? Vivian recovered first, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, Clara, how embarrassing for you. Did you really follow your husband here like some jealous schoolgirl?" I ignored her, focusing on Elliot. "I found your note. Meet me at the usual place." "How long has this been going on?" Elliot's face crumpled. "Clara, it's not what you think." "I can explain dash." "Then explain," I shouted, tears threatening to spill. "Explain why you've been lying to me, sneaking around with her." "It's business, Clara," he pleaded. "Vivian's father is a major investor in my company." I had to dash. "Had to what?" I interrupted. "Meet his daughter in secret? Lie to your wife." Vivian laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, honey, you really don't understand how the business world works, do you? Sometimes, to seal a deal, you need a personal touch." I saw red. Before I knew what I was doing, my hand connected with Vivian's cheek, the slap echoing in the quiet gallery. "Clara." Elliot grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Stop it." I wrenched away from him, my voice ice cold. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." Elliot's face was a mask of anguish. "Please let me explain. Henry's investment is crucial for the company. I had to keep Vivian happy, but I swear, nothing happened between us." "Nothing happened?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been lying to me for weeks, Elliot. Meeting her in secret. That's not nothing." Vivian rubbed her cheek, her eyes glittering with malice. "Face it, Clara. You're out of your depth here. Elliot needs someone who understands his world, not some number-crunching nobody." I turned to leave, unable to bear another moment in that room. Elliot caught my arm again. "Clara, wait.
Please.
I love you. This was all just business, I swear." I looked into his eyes, searching for the man I'd fallen in love with. But all I saw was a stranger. "If this is your idea of business, Elliot, then I want no part of it. Or you." As I stormed out of the gallery, I heard Vivian's mocking laughter behind me. "I told you she couldn't handle it, Elliot. Now, where were we?" I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. When I arrived, I noticed a sleek black car parked outside our house. A distinguished-looking older man stepped out as I approached. "Mrs. Sinclair?" he asked, his voice grave. "I'm Henry Blackwood, Vivian's father. I think we need to talk." I stared at him, suddenly realizing that this night was far from over. The family divide had only just begun. The days following my confrontation with Elliot and Vivian were a blur of sleepless nights and tense silences. Elliot had come home that night, full of apologies and explanations, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. The conversation with Henry Blackwood still echoed in my mind, his warnings about his daughter's manipulative nature only adding to my confusion and hurt. I threw myself into work, desperate for a distraction. It was during a lunch break, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, that I first noticed something was off. A photo of Elliot at a charity gala popped up on my feed, but it wasn't the image that caught my attention. It was the caption. "Elliot Sinclair looking dashing as always. Some men just can't be tied down, can they? Hashtag single and ready to mingle." My stomach churned as I realized the post was from Vivian's account. I scrolled further, finding more photos, more suggestive captions. Elliot at business dinners, Elliot at the gym, Elliot leaving his office late at night. Each image carefully curated to paint a picture of a man living a separate life from his wife. My phone buzzed with a text from Margot. "Have you seen this? Call me ASAP." I met Margot at our favorite cafe an hour later, my hands shaking as I clutched my coffee. "I don't understand," I said, fighting back tears. "Why is she doing this?" Margot's eyes flashed with anger. "Because she's a manipulative bitch who can't stand to see you happy. She's trying to isolate you, Clara. Make you doubt everything." "It's working," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Have you talked to Elliot about this?" I shook my head. "We've barely spoken since that night at the gallery. He keeps trying to explain, but I can't bear to hear it." Margot reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You need to confront this head-on, Clara. Both Vivian and Elliot. You can't let her win." As if on cue, my phone lit up with a notification. Another post from Vivian, this time a photo of her and Elliot at what looked like a business lunch. The caption made my blood run cold. Some partnerships are just meant to be. In business and in life. Hashtag soulmates. That's it, Margot said, her voice steely. We're putting an end to this right now. Before I could protest, she had grabbed my phone, furiously typing. I watched in a mix of horror and admiration as she commented on the post. Funny, I don't see Elliot's wedding ring in this photo. Must be an old picture, right? Because surely you wouldn't be stupid enough to post current photos implying a married man is single. That could be considered slander, couldn't it? Hashtag check your facts, hashtag lawyer up. Margot. I gasped. What are you doing? She handed my phone back, a satisfied smirk on her face, giving that snake a taste of her own medicine. Now it's your turn. What do you mean? I mean it's time to fight fire with fire. If Vivian wants to play dirty on social media, let's show her how it's done. For the next hour, Margot and I crafted a series of posts, photos of Elliot and me from happier times, our wedding day, romantic vacations. Each one tagged with pointed hashtags like hashtag happily married and hashtag true love. It felt petty, but also strangely empowering. As we were about to post the last photo, my phone rang. Elliot's name flashed on the screen. You need to answer it, Margot urged. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. Hello. Clara. Elliot's voice was urgent. We need to talk.
Now.
Things are spiraling out of control. I could hear the panic in his voice, and despite everything, my heart ached for him. Okay, I said softly. I'm listening. As Elliot began to speak, I realized that this social media war was just the beginning. The real battle for my marriage and my dignity was about to begin. And I was finally ready to fight. The annual charity gala for the city's children's hospital loomed on my calendar, a glittering event I'd once looked forward to. Now, it felt like a minefield. Elliot had been called away on an urgent business trip, leaving me to face the wolves alone. As I stepped into the grand ballroom, a sea of familiar faces turned to me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and poorly concealed pity. I plastered on my best smile, determined not to let them see me falter. Champagne flute in hand, I navigated the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and deflecting not-so-subtle inquiries about Elliot's absence. Clara, darling. A booming voice cut through the chatter. I turned to see Henry Blackwood approaching, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. You look absolutely radiant tonight, Mr. Blackwood. I greeted him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. It's good to see you. He waved a hand dismissively. Please call me Henry. I was hoping we might have a chat. There are some business matters I'd like to discuss. Intrigued and slightly wary, I followed him to a quieter corner of the room. As we talked, I found myself unexpectedly charmed by Henry's wit and intelligence. He spoke passionately about his latest business ventures, asking for my opinion on financial matters with genuine interest. You know, Clara, he said, his eyes twinkling, I've always said Elliot was a lucky man. But I'm beginning to think I underestimated just how lucky. I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. That's very kind of you to say, Henry. It's the truth. In fact, I have a proposition for you. He leaned in conspiratorially. I'm looking for a sharp mind to help oversee a new project. Someone with financial acumen and a fresh perspective. I think you might be just the person I'm looking for. My heart raced at the opportunity. I'm flattered, but wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? With your investment in Elliot's company. Henry's expression darkened slightly. To be frank, Clara, I'm beginning to have some concerns about that investment. But that's a conversation for another time. This project would be entirely separate, under my personal oversight. As we continued to discuss the details, I couldn't shake the feeling that this could be a turning point. A chance to prove myself beyond the shadow of my marriage and the drama with Vivian. Speak of the devil, I spotted Vivian across the room, her eyes narrowing as she took in the animated conversation between her father and me. She began to make her way towards us, but Henry noticed her approach and quickly steered me away. Let's continue this discussion somewhere more private, he suggested, guiding me towards the terrace. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy ballroom. Henry produced a business card, pressing it into my hand. Think about my offer, Clara. I believe we could do great things together. As he turned to leave, he paused, his expression softening. And Clara? Don't let the whispers and stares get to you. You're made of stronger stuff than that. I watched him disappear back into the crowd, my mind whirling with possibilities. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope, of purpose beyond the drama that had consumed my life. Returning to the ballroom, I found myself face to face with Vivian. Her smile was sharp as a knife's edge. Well, well, she purred. Cozying up to Daddy Dearest now, are we?
How?
Enterprising of you. I met her gaze steadily. You know, Vivian, I used to wonder what Elliot ever saw in you. Now I realize absolutely nothing of substance. Her eyes flashed with anger, but before she could retort, I continued, enjoy your games while you can. Because I'm done playing. As I walked away, head held high, I could feel the weight of eyes on me. But this time, instead of shrinking under their scrutiny, I felt empowered. Henry's offer was more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to reclaim my narrative, to show the world and myself what I was truly capable of. The game was changing, and for once, I felt like I might just have the winning hand. The weeks following Henry's job offer flew by in a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into my new role, relishing the challenge and the distraction it provided from my crumbling personal life. Elliot and I were barely speaking, our conversations reduced to terse exchanges about household logistics. As I delved deeper into Henry's business dealings, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Contracts that should have been slam dunks for Elliot's company were mysteriously falling through. Deals were being sabotaged at the 11th hour, always with a competing bid swooping in to save the day. It wasn't until I stumbled across an email chain buried deep in the company archives that the pieces finally clicked into place. My hands shook as I read the damning evidence. Vivian had been using her father's connections to undermine Elliot's business, all while playing the devoted friend and confidant. I printed out the emails, my mind racing. Should I confront Vivian? Go straight to Henry? As I debated my next move, my phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. We need to talk. Dinner tonight. My heart clenched. Despite everything, I still loved him. Okay, I replied. 8 p.m. at home. The hours crawled by. When Elliot finally walked through the door, the tension between us was palpable. He looked haggard, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. Clara, he began, his voice hoarse. I owe you an explanation. About Vivian, about everything. I held up a hand, silencing him. Before you say anything, there's something you need to see. I handed him the stack of emails, watching his face as he read. His expression morphed from confusion to shock to anger. This can't be real, he muttered. Vivian wouldn't. She couldn't. She did, I said softly. And she's been playing us both for fools. Elliot sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I've been such an idiot. Clara, I swear, nothing happened between Vivian and me. She kept insisting on these meetings, saying they were crucial for maintaining her father's investment. I thought I was protecting our future, but I was just playing right into her hands. I sat beside him, close but not touching. Why didn't you tell me? He looked up, his eyes filled with remorse. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to worry you. God, Clara, I've made such a mess of things. For the first time in months, I felt the wall between us start to crumble. We both have, I admitted. But this changes everything. Elliot nodded, a spark of his old determination returning. We need to confront her. Show Henry what his daughter's been up to. It's not that simple, I cautioned. Henry's offered me a position in his company. If we're not careful, this could blow up in our faces. Elliot's eyes widened. You've been working for Henry? Clara, that's brilliant. We can use this to our advantage. As we talked late into the night, formulating a plan, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, Elliot and I were on the same side. The next morning, I called Henry's office. I need to schedule an urgent meeting, I told his secretary. It's about Vivian. An hour later, I sat across from Henry in his opulent office, the incriminating emails spread out between us. His face grew increasingly grim as I laid out the evidence of his daughter's betrayal. "I had no idea," he said finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Clara, I can't thank you enough for bringing this to my attention. But I have to ask, what do you want in return for this information?" I met his gaze steadily. "Justice, Henry. For Elliot, for your company, and for myself. Vivian needs to be held accountable." Henry nodded slowly. "You're right, of course. But tread carefully, Clara. Vivian won't go down without a fight." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. "Vivian just called. She wants to meet tonight to discuss the future of our partnership. What should I do?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Tell her yes," I replied. "It's time to end this once and for all." The annual Blackwood Industries Gala was in full swing, the ballroom a glittering sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart pounding beneath my sleek black dress. Elliot was by my side, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. "Are you sure about this?" he murmured, his eyes scanning the room for Vivian. I nodded, steeling myself. "It's now or never." As if on cue, Vivian appeared, resplendent in a crimson gown that clung to her curves. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted us, but her lips curved into a practiced smile as she sauntered over. "Elliot, darling," she purred, pointedly ignoring me. "I was beginning to think you'd stood me up." Elliot's grip on my waist tightened. "Vivian, we need to talk. Privately." She arched an eyebrow, her gaze flicking dismissively to me. "Of course. Shall we use Daddy's office?" As we followed her through the crowd, I caught Henry's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod, and I felt a surge of resolve. "This ends tonight." Vivian closed the office door behind us, her facade dropping as soon as we were alone. "All right, what's this about? I hope you're not here to bore me with more excuses about why our deal fell through." Elliot's jaw clenched. "No excuses, Vivian. We know what you've been doing." Her laugh was sharp and brittle. "And what exactly is it you think I've been doing?" I stepped forward, pulling out the folder of evidence I'd been carrying. "Sabotaging Elliot's business deals. Using your father's connections to undermine contracts. Manipulating both of us for your own gain." Vivian's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her mask of cool indifference slipped back into place. "That's quite an accusation, Clara. I hope you have proof to back it up." "Oh, we do," Elliot said, his voice hard. "Every email, every doctor contract, every backroom deal. It's all here." For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in Vivian's eyes. But it was quickly replaced by a look of cold calculation. "So what? You think you can just waltz in here and threaten me? In my father's company?" "Your father already knows," I said quietly. The color drained from Vivian's face. "You're bluffing." As if on cue, the office door opened, and Henry stepped in. The look on his face was one of profound disappointment. "I'm afraid they're not, Vivian." Vivian's composure cracked. "Daddy, I can explain dash." Henry held up a hand, silencing her. "I've seen the evidence, Vivian. There's nothing to explain." "You don't understand," Vivian pleaded, her voice rising. "I did it for us, for the company. Elliot's business was a threat dash. A threat." Henry's voice was sharp. "The only threat here is you, Vivian. To this family's reputation, to the integrity of our business." Vivian's eyes darted wildly between us, like a cornered animal. "You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter." "And that makes this betrayal all the more painful," Henry said, his voice heavy with regret. "As of this moment, you are no longer a part of Blackwood Industries. Your trust fund will be frozen, your position terminated." Vivian's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. I'll fight you. All of you." "I'm afraid you'll find that quite difficult," I interjected, my voice steady. "Given that all of your recent activities are now a matter of legal record." The fight seemed to drain out of Vivian all at once. She slumped against the desk, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. Henry's expression softened slightly. "That, Vivian, is entirely up to you. But it won't be here, and it won't be with my money or influence to protect you." As Henry led a shell-shocked Vivian from the room, I felt Elliot's arms encircle me from behind. "It's over," he murmured into my hair. I turned in his embrace, meeting his gaze. "No," I said softly. "It's just beginning." As we rejoined the gala, the weight of the past months finally lifting, I realized that this victory wasn't just about exposing Vivian or saving Elliot's business. It was about reclaiming our lives, our relationship, and our future together. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress. The Woman of the Year award ceremony was tonight, and my nerves were on edge. "You look stunning," Elliot said, appearing behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. I leaned into his embrace, marveling at how far we'd come. The months following Vivian's downfall had been challenging, but they'd also been transformative. We'd attended couples therapy, rebuilding our trust and communication one session at a time. Elliot had thrown himself into revitalizing his business, while I'd taken on a permanent role at Blackwood Industries, working closely with Henry to implement new ethical guidelines. "Ready to go?" Elliot asked, offering his arm. As we entered the grand ballroom, I was struck by how different it felt from that fateful night 6 months ago. The air was charged with positivity and celebration, not tension and deceit. Henry approached us, beaming. "Clara, Elliot. So good to see you both." We chatted easily, the awkwardness of our past entanglements long gone. Henry had become not just a mentor, but a friend. "Clara," he said, his tone growing serious. "I wanted to thank you again. What you did. It wasn't just about exposing Vivian. It was a wake-up call for me, for the whole company. We're better for it." I squeezed his arm. "Thank you, Henry. That means more than you know." As the ceremony began, I felt Elliot's hand slip into mine. The presenter took the stage, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "This year's Woman of the Year award goes to someone who exemplifies integrity, resilience, and leadership. Someone who, in the face of personal and professional challenges, chose to take the high road. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Clara Sinclair." The room erupted in applause. In a daze, I made my way to the stage, accepting the award with shaking hands. "Thank you," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "This past year has taught me so much about strength, about forgiveness, and about the power of truth." As I spoke, my eyes found Elliot in the crowd. His face shone with pride and love. We all face moments that test us, that make us question everything we thought we knew. But it's in those moments that we discover who we truly are. I thought of Vivian, last I'd heard working at a small nonprofit, slowly rebuilding her life away from the glitz and manipulation of her past. This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever had to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. It's for those who choose love and honesty over ego and deceit. As I concluded my speech to thunderous applause, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The drama, the pain, the uncertainty, it was all behind us now. Later that night, Elliot and I stood on our balcony, the city lights twinkling below. I leaned against him, the award sitting on the table beside us. "I'm so proud of you," he murmured, his arms tightening around me. "I'm proud of us," I replied. We could have let all of this tear us apart. Instead, it made us stronger. Elliot turned me to face him, his eyes serious. "Clara, I know we've been through hell and back, but I want you to know, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're not just my wife, you're my partner, my best friend, my rock." Tears pricked my eyes as he continued. "I fall in love with you more every day. And I promise, from this day forward, no more secrets, no more doubts. Just us, facing whatever comes next together." As we sealed his words with a kiss, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but we'd weathered the storm. We'd emerged not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more in love than ever. The drama with Vivian, the betrayals and doubts, they were chapters in our story, but they didn't define us. What defined us was this moment, and all the moments to come. A future built on trust, respect, and an unshakable bond. As we turned to go inside, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. And that was the greatest victory of all. My name is Lydia Hawthorne, and I never thought I'd be standing at the altar with a man my father distrusted. But here I was, my heart pounding beneath layers of white satin, ready to say, I do, to Eli Carson. You look beautiful, sweetheart, my mother, Miriam, whispered as she adjusted my veil. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mix of joy and something else I couldn't quite place. I smiled, pushing down the flutter of nerves in my stomach. Thanks, Mom. Is Dad ready? As if on cue, my father's weathered face appeared in the doorway. Nathaniel Hawthorne was a man of few words, but his presence filled the room. He looked at me, his expression a storm of emotions. Lydia, he said, his voice gruff. Can I have a moment alone with you? Mom nodded, squeezing my hand before slipping out. Dad approached, his steps hesitant. You're sure about this? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I forced a laugh. Dad, I'm getting married in 10 minutes. A bit late for cold feet, don't you think? He didn't smile. Instead, he took my hands in his skin rough from years of working the land. Lydia, promise me you'll always remember where you come from, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. This farm, this family, it's in your blood. A pang of unease shot through me. Dad, what's this about? You know I love the farm. It's not about the farm, sweetheart. It's about you. He paused, struggling with his words. Eli, he's different from us. I just want you to be careful. I pulled my hands away, frustration bubbling up. Different how? Because he didn't grow up on a farm? Because he has ambitions beyond Willow Creek? That's not what I meant, Dash. Then what did you mean? I snapped, immediately regretting my tone.
I'm sorry, Dad.
I know you're just looking out for me, but I love Eli. He makes me happy. Dad's shoulder sagged. I hope you're right, Lydia. I truly do. Before I could respond, Mom poked her head in. It's time, she said softly. Dad offered his arm, and I took it, pushing aside the doubts his words had stirred. As we walked down the aisle, I caught sight of Eli. His smile was dazzling, his eyes locked on mine. This was right, I told myself. This was my future. The ceremony passed in a blur. Before I knew it, we were at the reception, twirling on the dance floor as Mr. and Mrs. Carson. Happy Mrs. Carson, Eli murmured in my ear. I grinned up at him, ecstatic, though I think my dad might need some convincing. Eli's smile faltered for a moment. Your old man's never warmed up to me, has he? He's just protective, I said, though a small part of me wondered if there was more to it. Give him time. Time, huh? Eli's eyes drifted to where my parents stood, watching us. Well, we've got plenty of that ahead of us. A whole lifetime. As we swayed to the music, I caught my father's gaze over Eli's shoulder. The worry in his eyes made my stomach clench. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the warmth of Eli's arms around me. This was my choice, my future. Whatever doubts my father had, I was determined to prove him wrong. Eli and I would build a life together, one that would make both our families proud. But as the night wore on and we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my father's words echoed in my mind. Remember where you come from. Little did I know then how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how much I would cling to them in the years to come. The city skyline glittered outside our apartment window, a far cry from the starlit nights back on the farm. I sighed, checking my watch. Eli was late. Again. Lydia, you there? Eli's voice crackled through my phone. Where are you? I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. We were supposed to leave for my parents an hour ago. About that. Eli's tone made my stomach drop. Something came up at work. I can't make it this weekend. I closed my eyes, counting to 10. Eli, we haven't visited the farm in months. My parents are expecting us. I know, but this deal could be huge for us. You understand, right? Before I could respond, He hung up. I stared at the phone, a familiar ache settling in my chest. The next morning, I found myself alone on the familiar dirt road leading to my childhood home. As I pulled up, Dad was already waiting on the porch, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "There's my girl," he said, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of hay and home. "Where's Eli?" I forced a smile. "Work emergency." He sends his apologies. Dad's expression darkened for a moment before he masked it. "Well, come on in. Your mother's been cooking up a storm." Inside, Mom fussed over me, piling my plate high with comfort food. "You're too thin," she clucked. "Is Eli feeding you properly in that big city?" "I'm fine, Mom." I laughed, but it felt hollow. "How are things here?" As they filled me in on farm life, I felt a pang of longing. This was my world, simple and honest. So different from the sleek, often cutthroat city life I now led. Later, as I helped Dad with the evening chores, he broached the subject I'd been dreading. "Lydia," he began, his voice careful. "Are you happy?" I paused, a bale of hay in my arms. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" Dad's eyes, wise and knowing, searched mine. "It's just, you seem different. And Eli, well, he's missed the last 3 visits." "He's busy, Dad. His career is taking off. And yours." I bit my lip. My own job, once a source of pride, had taken a back seat to supporting Eli's ambitions. "It's fine." Dad nodded, but I could see he wasn't convinced. "Just remember, Lydia, you're a hawthorn. We're made of stronger stuff." That night, lying in my old bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I loved Eli, didn't I? But why did being here, among the familiar creaks and scents of the farmhouse, feel more like home than our sleek city apartment ever had? My phone buzzed. A text from Eli. "Miss you. How's the farm?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. How could I explain the comfort of worn floorboards under my feet, or the satisfaction of a day's honest work? How could I convey the growing disconnect I felt between this life and the one I shared with him? In the end, I simply replied, "It's good. See you tomorrow." As I drifted off to sleep, my father's words echoed in my mind. "We're made of stronger stuff." I couldn't shake the feeling that I might need that strength sooner than I thought. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, Mom pressed a jar of homemade preserves into my hands. "For you and Eli," she said, her eyes worried. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart." I hugged them both tightly, a lump forming in my throat. As I drove away, I watched them grow smaller in my rearview mirror, standing together on the porch. They looked like pillars of strength, rooted in the land they loved. Turning onto the highway, I steeled myself for the return to city life, to Eli, and to the growing unease I could no longer ignore. Something had to change, but I wasn't sure I was ready for what that might mean. The pregnancy test trembled in my hands, 2 pink lines staring back at me. I was elated, terrified, and everything in between. Eli and I were going to be parents. "Eli," I called out, my voice quivering with excitement. "Can you come here?" He sauntered into the bathroom, his eyes widening as he saw the test. "Is that?" I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "We're having a baby." For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, uncertainty, but it was quickly replaced by his trademark grin. "Well, look at us, all grown up," he chuckled, pulling me into a hug that felt just a little too loose. As the months passed, my excitement grew along with my belly. Eli, however, seemed to retreat further into his work. "I'm securing our future," he'd say when I asked him to come to doctor's appointments or help set up the nursery. The day Caleb was born was the happiest and most terrifying of my life. As I held our son, I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. Eli stood by the hospital bed, looking more lost than I'd ever seen him. "Want to hold him?" I asked softly. Eli hesitated before taking Caleb awkwardly in his arms. "He's so small," he murmured, a hint of wonder in his voice. For a moment, I thought maybe this would be the turning point, that fatherhood would bring out a new side of Eli. But as the weeks went by, his indifference became impossible to ignore. Then came the call that shattered my world. "Lydia," my aunt's voice cracked over the phone. "There's been an accident. Your parents." The farm felt empty without them. As I stood in the kitchen where Mom had taught me to bake, where Dad had bandaged my scraped knees, the weight of their absence crushed me. Eli's hand on my shoulder startled me. "We should talk about what to do with the farm," he said, his tone businesslike. I turned to him, incredulous. "What do you mean?" "Well, we can't keep it," he said matter-of-factly. "It's not practical. We should sell it, use the money to set ourselves up in the city." His words hit me like a physical blow. "Sell it? Eli, this is my home. My heritage." "It's an asset, Lydia," he argued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Think about Caleb's future. We could set up a college fund, buy a bigger apartment." I cradled Caleb closer to my chest, suddenly feeling very alone. "I can't just sell it, Eli. My parents' whole lives are in this land." "Were," he corrected coldly. "They're gone, Lydia. We need to think about the living." As he walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, something inside me hardened. I looked down at Caleb, peacefully sleeping in my arms, unaware of the turmoil around him. "I won't let him take this from us," I whispered to my son. "This is your legacy, too." Over the next few weeks, as we settled my parents' affairs, the rift between Eli and me grew. Every conversation seemed to circle back to selling the farm. His persistence only strengthened my resolve. One night, as I rocked Caleb to sleep in my old bedroom, I made a decision. I wouldn't sell the farm. Somehow, I'd find a way to keep it, to honor my parents' memory and give Caleb a connection to his roots. As I laid Caleb in his crib, my eyes fell on a photo of my parents on their wedding day. They looked so young, so full of hope and love. I picked up the frame, tracing their smiling faces with my finger. "I'll make you proud," I whispered. "I'll find a way to keep the farm alive." Little did I know then how that promise would change the course of my life, or the battle that lay ahead with the man I had once thought was my partner in everything. The doorbell's chime cut through the tense silence that had settled over our apartment. Eli and I had just finished another argument about the farm, his words still ringing in my ears. "You're being irrational, Lydia. That farm is a millstone around our necks." I opened the door to find a striking woman in her 50s, her silver hair cut in a sleek bob. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place who. "Lydia Carson?" she asked, her voice crisp. I nodded, confused. "I'm Judith Blackwood, Eli's aunt." My eyes widened. Eli had rarely mentioned his family, let alone an aunt. "I'm sorry. Eli's not home right now, Dash." "I'm here to see you, actually," Judith interrupted, her gaze softening slightly. "May I come in?" Hesitantly, I stepped aside. As Judith entered, her eyes swept over the apartment, lingering on the family photos, mostly of my side of the family. "Caleb's with the sitter," I explained, gesturing to the living room. "Can I get you something to drink?" Judith shook her head, settling onto the couch. "I'll be direct, Lydia. I'm here because I'm concerned about you and my great-nephew." My defenses immediately went up. "I'm not sure I understand, Dash." "Let me ask you something," Judith cut in. "Has Eli ever told you about his parents? About his childhood?" I frowned, realizing I knew embarrassingly little. "He doesn't like to talk about it much. I know his parents passed away when he was young." Judith's laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. "Is that what he told you?" "Lydia, Eli's parents are very much alive. They live in Florida." The room seemed to tilt. That's not possible. Eli wouldn't lie about something like that. Wouldn't he?" Judith leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Lydia, I've known Eli his whole life. I love him, but I also know what he's capable of. The manipulation, the lies." As Judith spoke, painting a picture of a young Eli so at odds with the man I thought I knew, my mind raced. The unexplained absences, the secretive phone calls, the constant push for more money, it all started to take on a sinister new light. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Judith's expression softened. Because I see in you what I once saw in myself. A good person, blinded by love and charm. I let Eli manipulate me for years, costing me my business and nearly my sanity. I can't stand by and watch it happen to you and that sweet boy of yours. She reached into her bag, pulling out a file. This contains records of Eli's past, financial documents, police reports, testimonies from people he's taken advantage of. I'm not asking you to believe me outright. Just look into it. For Caleb's sake, if not your own. As she stood to leave, Judith paused at the door. Lydia, you seem like a strong woman. Don't let Eli dim your light. You and Caleb deserve better. After she left, I sat frozen on the couch, the file unopened on my lap. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to cling to the image of Eli I'd built up over the years. But a small voice, one that sounded suspiciously like my father's, urged me to look. With trembling hands, I opened the file. As I read, tears began to fall. Bank statements showing large, unexplained withdrawals. A restraining order from an ex-girlfriend. A series of jobs, each ending abruptly under suspicious circumstances. It was like watching a house of cards collapse. Every document, every testimony, chipped away at the foundation of my marriage. The Eli I thought I knew was crumbling before my eyes, replaced by a stranger I wasn't sure I'd ever truly known. As I heard Eli's key in the lock, I quickly hid the file. My heart raced as he walked in, his easy smile so familiar yet suddenly alien. Hey babe, he called out. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile, my mind reeling. Everything's fine. I lied, realizing with a sickening clarity that I was becoming as adept at deception as he was. Just a long day. As Eli chatted about his day, I watched him with new eyes, wondering how much of what he said was truth and how much was carefully crafted fiction. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of Judith's revelations hung heavy on my shoulders as I navigated the following weeks. Every interaction with Eli felt like a carefully choreographed dance, each step measured to hide my growing suspicions. I found myself scrutinizing his every word, searching for the lies I now suspected lurked beneath the surface. One rainy Tuesday, as I was sorting through some of Eli's old papers in search of a missing tax document, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was a bank statement for an account I'd never seen before, showing regular transfers to someone named Hannah. My hands trembled as I dug deeper, uncovering more statements, text messages, and even a few photos. The woman in the pictures was young, probably in her mid-20s, with a radiant smile that twisted my stomach into knots. In one photo, Eli's arm was draped casually around her waist, his expression more carefree than I'd seen in years. I felt like I was going to be sick. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. The late nights at work, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden business trips.
It had all been a lie.
As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't sit idly by any longer. With a determination I hadn't felt in years, I gathered the evidence, called our neighbor to watch Caleb, and headed to Eli's office. The sleek high-rise loomed before me, a monument to the life Eli had always wanted. I marched past the security desk, my heart pounding as the elevator climbed to the 20th floor. As I approached Eli's office, I heard laughter, his unmistakable chuckle mingled with a woman's lilting giggle. I burst through the door without knocking. Eli and a young woman, Hannah, I presumed, sprang apart, their faces a mixture of shock and guilt. Lydia! Eli exclaimed, his charm kicking in even as panic flashed in his eyes. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? I stood there, trembling with rage and hurt. Is everything okay? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper.
No, Eli.
Everything is most definitely not okay. Hannah looked between us, confusion evident on her face. Eli, what's going on? Who is this? I turned to her, my heart breaking for this woman who, like me, had fallen for Eli's lies. "I'm his wife," I said softly, "and the mother of his child." The color drained from Hannah's face. She turned to Eli, her voice shaking. "You're married? You have a kid? You told me you were divorced." Eli's mask of charm slipped, revealing a desperation I'd never seen before. "Lydia, Hannah, I can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like, dash." "Save it." I cut him off, tossing the stack of evidence onto his desk. "I know everything, Eli. The affair, the secret bank account, the lies about your family. It's over." As the full weight of his deception crashed down around us, I felt a strange sense of calm. I turned to Hannah, who looked shell-shocked. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this. You deserve better." With that, I walked out, leaving Eli's stammering excuses behind me. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt as though I could breathe freely for the first time in years. My phone buzzed again, a text from Judith. "How are you holding up?" I took a deep breath, realizing I'd been unconsciously heading towards the bus station that would take me back to the farm. "Back home. I'm okay," I typed back. "I think it's time for a fresh start." As the city lights faded behind me, I thought of Caleb, of the farm, of the life I'd left behind. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope stirring in my chest. The betrayal had been unveiled, but with it came a chance for redemption, not for Eli, but for myself. It was time to reclaim the strength I'd forgotten I had, to build a life of integrity for Caleb and for the memory of my parents. As the familiar countryside began to appear outside the bus window, I made a silent vow. This was the end of Lydia, the naive city wife, and the beginning of a new chapter, one written on my own terms. The farmhouse kitchen, once a sanctuary of warmth and comfort, now felt like a battleground. I stood at the counter, my knuckles white as I gripped its edge, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. The screen door creaked open, and Eli's footsteps echoed through the house. "Lydia," he called out, his voice a mixture of confusion and irritation. "What the hell is going on? Why are my things packed?" I turned to face him, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "I think you know why, Eli." His eyes darted around the room, taking in the suitcases by the door, the papers spread across the table. For a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes before his familiar mask of charm slid into place. "Honey, whatever you think is happening, I can explain," he said, taking a step towards me with his hands raised placatingly. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. Don't you dare try to charm your way out of this. I know everything, Eli. The affair, the lies about your family, the plans for my inheritance." His facade cracked, revealing a coldness I'd never seen before. "So what if I did? You were so caught up in your precious farm and your small-town values that you couldn't see the bigger picture. I was trying to give us a better life." "A better life?" I scoffed, anger rising in my chest. "By lying to me? By cheating on me? By trying to steal my parents' legacy?" Eli's eyes narrowed. "That farm is a gold mine, Lydia. Do you have any idea how much we could get for that land? But you're too sentimental to see it. I was doing this for us, for our future." "No, Eli," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "You were doing this for yourself. You always have been." He laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound that sent chills down my spine. "And what are you going to do about it? You're nothing without me, Lydia. You think you can run this farm on your own? Raise Caleb by yourself? You'll come crawling back within a month." His words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. Instead, I straightened my spine, channeling every ounce of strength my parents had instilled in me. "I'd rather struggle on my own than live another day in a lie," I said, my voice low but firm. "You're leaving, Eli.
Today.
And you're not taking a cent of my inheritance with you." For a moment, I saw a raw fury flash in his eyes, and I tensed, ready for him to lash out. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating look that was almost worse. "You'll regret this, Lydia," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." No, Eli, I replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I'm not the naive farm girl you married anymore. I'm my father's daughter, and I will fight for what's mine. We stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills, the air thick with unspoken threats and shattered dreams. Finally, Eli broke eye contact, grabbing his suitcases with a sneer. This isn't over, he spat as he headed for the door. Yes, it is, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. As the door slammed behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The confrontation I dreaded for so long was over, and I was still standing. Tears pricked at my eyes, a mix of relief, fear, and determination. I walked to the window, watching Eli's car disappear down the long driveway. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the fields, reminding me of all the sunsets I'd watched with my parents from this very spot. I won't let you down, I whispered, placing a hand on my stomach where our second child, unknown to Eli, was growing. Any of you. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I turned away from the window, my mind already racing with plans. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The confrontation with Eli hadn't broken me, it had awakened a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. Tomorrow, I would begin the fight to save my farm, to build a future for my children, and to reclaim the woman I was always meant to be. The morning after Eli's departure, I stood on the porch of my childhood home, surveying the fields that stretched out before me. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, but for the first time in years, I felt a spark of excitement ignite within me. My phone buzzed, and I saw Judith's name flash across the screen. Are you ready? Her text read. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenge ahead. As I'll ever be, I replied. An hour later, Judith's sleek car pulled up the gravel driveway. She stepped out, looking every inch the successful businesswoman in her tailored suit. But her eyes were kind as she approached me. Lydia, she said, embracing me warmly. I'm proud of you for taking this step. We settled at the kitchen table, the same one where my parents had taught me about crop rotations and animal husbandry. Now it was covered with financial statements, market research, and business plans. Okay, Judith began, her tone shifting to one of focused determination. Let's talk about turning this farm into a thriving business. For hours, we pored over the documents, discussing everything from organic certification to agritourism opportunities. Judith's business acumen combined with my intimate knowledge of the farm, creating a synergy that felt almost magical. What about this section here? I asked, pointing to a fallow field near the creek. I've always thought it would be perfect for a pick-your-own-berry patch. Judith's eyes lit up. Brilliant! That could be a major draw for families and tourists. We could even partner with local schools for educational programs. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, we sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. The beginnings of a solid plan had taken shape before us. Lydia, Judith said, her voice soft but firm. This won't be easy. There will be long days, sleepless nights, and moments when you'll want to give up. Are you sure you're ready for this? I looked out the window at the land that had nurtured generations of my family. I thought of Caleb, peacefully napping upstairs, and the new life growing inside me. Then I thought of Eli and his dismissive words, "You'll come crawling back within a month." A fire of determination blazed within me. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I said, my voice steady and sure. Judith smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. Then let's make it happen. Over the next few weeks, the farm buzzed with activity. I threw myself into the work, relishing the feeling of dirt under my fingernails and the ache in my muscles at the end of each day. Judith's connections proved invaluable, bringing in experts to help modernize our operations while staying true to the farm's roots. One evening, as I stood in the newly planted berry patch, Caleb toddled up to me, his little hands grasping a fistful of wildflowers. "For you, Mama," he said, his face beaming with pride. I scooped him up, inhaling the sweet scent of his hair mingled with the earthy aroma of the fields. "Thank you, sweetheart," I whispered, feeling a lump form in my throat. At that moment, I heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Eli's car coming up the driveway. He stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he took in the changes to the farm. "What's all this?" he demanded, gesturing to the new signage and equipment. I set Caleb down, giving him a gentle push towards the house. "This is our future, Eli," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "A future that doesn't include you." Eli's face contorted with anger. "You can't do this," he sputtered. "You have no idea what you're doing. You'll ruin everything." I stood my ground, feeling the strength of the earth beneath my feet.
No, Eli.
"I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm reclaiming my heritage, providing for our son, and building something meaningful. Something you never understood." As Eli's tirade continued, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. His words, once so powerful, now seemed hollow and desperate. I realized that I had outgrown not just Eli, but the version of myself that had allowed his manipulation for so long. "Leave, Eli," I said firmly. "You're not welcome here anymore." As he drove away, tires spitting gravel, I turned back to the fields, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but with every step, I was reclaiming not just my family's legacy, but my own strength and identity. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As darkness fell, I made my way back to the house, where Caleb waited, where new life grew within me, and where the future, bright and full of promise, beckoned. The autumn sun cast a golden glow over the fields as I stood on the porch, watching families stream into the farm for our first harvest festival. Children's laughter mingled with the scent of apple cider and freshly baked pies, a symphony of life and renewal. "Mama, look!" Caleb tugged at my hand, pointing excitedly at the hayride pulling away from the barn. "Can we go?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go." As we climbed aboard, I caught sight of Judith chatting with a group of investors. She gave me a subtle thumbs up, and I felt a surge of pride. In just a year, we transformed the struggling farm into a thriving agribusiness and community hub. The hayride jolted into motion, and I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. The gentle swell of my belly reminded me of the new life growing within, a sister for Caleb, and another thread in the tapestry of our future. As we rounded a bend, I spotted a familiar figure trudging up the driveway. Eli, looking disheveled and worn, his designer clothes a far cry from their former crisp perfection. "I need to talk to you," he called out as we passed. I sighed, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. "Meet me by the old oak in 10 minutes, I replied, my voice steady. After settling Caleb with a caramel apple and trusted employee, I made my way to the tree where Eli waited. "You've done well for yourself," he said, his tone a mixture of bitterness and grudging admiration. "What do you want, Eli?" I asked, crossing my arms protectively over my growing belly. His eyes widened as he noticed. "You're pregnant? Is it?" "Mine," I said firmly. "What happens in my life is no longer your concern." Eli's shoulders sagged. "Hannah left," he admitted. "The money's gone." I've got nothing, Lydia." For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but then I remembered all the lies, the manipulation, the years of diminishing myself to fit his expectations. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Eli," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But you made your choices. I can't help you." "But the farm, our history," he protested weakly. I shook my head. "This farm, this life, it's not yours anymore. It's mine and Caleb's and this little one's," I said, resting a hand on my belly. "You never understood what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. I'm sorry, but there's no place for you here." As if on cue, Judith appeared at my side. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her tone making it clear she was ready to intervene if needed. Eli's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. "You too? You planned this all along, didn't you?" "No, Eli," I said firmly. "We simply recognized our own worth and acted on it." something you never learned to do. With a final, defeated look, Eli turned and walked away. As he disappeared down the driveway, I felt the last remnants of our shared past fade away. Judith squeezed my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded, surprised to find I truly was. "More than okay. I'm free." We made our way back to the festival, where Caleb ran to greet us, his face sticky with caramel. As I scooped him up, I caught sight of my reflection in a nearby window. The woman looking back at me was strong, confident, and at peace, a far cry from the naive girl who had left this farm years ago. "Mama," Caleb said, his little hands framing my face. "Are you happy?" I looked around at the thriving farm, at Judith, who had become both mentor and friend, at the community that had rallied around us. I thought of my parents and the legacy they'd left, now renewed and flourishing. And I thought of the future stretching out before us, full of possibility and hope. "Yes, my love," I said, hugging him close. "I'm very happy." As the day wound down and the last visitors departed, I stood once more on the porch. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues, a fitting end to a transformative chapter. I placed a hand on my belly, feeling a gentle kick. "Welcome to the family, little one," I whispered. "You're coming into a world of love, strength, and integrity. A world where we remember where we come from, but we're not afraid to grow beyond it." With a contented sigh, I turned and walked into the house, ready to face whatever the future might bring. The door closed behind me, not as an ending, but as the beginning of a new, authentic life, one cultivated with my own hands, nourished by the rich soil of my heritage, and blooming with the promise of tomorrow.